What if I told you that the misery of old age isn't a destiny, but a decision? Most people see their later years as a slow, inevitable decline, a waiting room for the end. But I've seen that it's something else entirely, a series of invisible traps we set for ourselves. If you've fallen into even 2 or 3 of these, your final act will be a tragedy. And the last one I'll share is the most insidious of all, the slow fade. When I look at how many elderly people navigate their final chapters, my heart aches. I see souls who have lived through wars, raised families, and gathered lifetimes of wisdom, yet they move through their days like ghosts. They are physically present, but their spirit has already checked out. They exist on a diet of stale memories and quiet desperation. And the most heartbreaking part, this is not a sentence handed down by time. It is a verdict they deliver upon themselves, day by day, through a series of devastating errors. The first trap that ensures a bitter end is the prison of past grievances. I have sat with so many older individuals who are curators of their own personal museum of pain. Every room is filled with dusty artifacts of betrayal, disappointment, and ancient slights. Their conversation is a guided tour of who failed them decades ago, the opportunities life stole, the respect they were never given. This story of victimhood becomes their lifeblood, the very fuel for their existence. But let me be blunt. Carrying a grudge is like carrying a backpack filled with stones. It doesn't harm the person who gave you the stones. It only breaks your own back. Every morning you choose to polish those old hurts. You are choosing to be a prisoner of a past that no longer exists. You chain yourself to people who have long since forgotten you. The pain you are nursing serves no purpose other than to contaminate your present and guarantee a lonely future. It is a slow, acting poison, and you are the one drinking it every day. The body ages, that is a fact of life. But it's the spirit that rots first, eaten away by the acid of unforgiveness. When you refuse to let go, you are not punishing your offender. You are sentencing yourself to a life sentence of reliving your worst day over and over. The alternative is not to pretend the hurt didn't happen. It's to understand that forgiveness is an act of self-preservation. It is the key that unlocks your own prison cell. It is the decision to put down the heavy stones and walk freely into whatever time you have left. The silent drought. The second devastating error is the self-imposed exile of isolation. I watch as people systematically unplug themselves from the world. They decline a friend's call, skip a family gathering, avoid a community event. Each time, they tell themselves it's because they're tired or because people are just too much work. They call it independence, but in reality, it is a slow march into the desert of loneliness. This is rarely a dramatic event. It's 1,000 small no's that build walls around your heart. And these walls are tragically effective. They don't just keep out the annoyances of human connection. They keep out the light, the laughter, the support, and the very energy we need to survive. Humans are not solitary creatures. We are like plants. We need the sunlight of connection to thrive. I have seen people in their final years who are utterly alone. Their apartments, quiet tombs filled with photos of a life they no longer participate in. They haven't had a meaningful conversation in weeks. No one knows their struggles. No one would notice if they didn't wake up. The cruel irony is that this isolation is often born of pride. They don't want to be a burden. But what they truly fear is vulnerability. The admission that they are human and still need love, touch, and conversation. So they choose the quiet dignity of fading away over the risk of reaching out. But the wisest elders I know treat their relationships like a garden. They water them, tend to them, and know that the harvest of love and connection is the most precious crop of old age. The closed mind. The third fatal trap is letting your mind become a dusty attic of old opinions. I meet so many people who essentially stopped learning on the day they retired. They swap intellectual curiosity for passive entertainment, trading challenging books for mindless television. Then they wonder why their world feels so small, so gray, so pointless. Your mind is not a hard drive that gets full. It's a living operating system that requires constant updates. When you stop feeding it new challenges, new ideas, and new perspectives, it doesn't just go idle, it starts to glitch. It gets stuck in loops of old thinking, rigid and unable to process the present. I've seen sharp, intelligent people turn into echoes of their former selves because they bought into the lie that learning has an age limit. They decided they were too old to learn that, or too set in their ways. But this is a choice, not a condition. Their minds didn't fail them, they failed their minds. The most alive elderly people I know are perpetual students. They're learning to use a tablet, debating politics with their grandchildren, or reading about discoveries that challenge everything they thought they knew. They understand that curiosity is the antidote to irrelevance. Keeping your mind sharp isn't about staying young. It's about staying present, staying engaged, and staying fully, vibrantly alive. The body's surrender. The fourth deadly mistake is treating your body like an abandoned car you've left to rust in a field. I see elderly people surrender to every ache and pain, accepting weakness and immobility as their unchangeable fate. They stop walking, they stop stretching, they stop engaging with the physical world, and then they complain that their body has betrayed them. The truth is, they have betrayed their body. Your body is the only vessel you have to navigate the seas of this life. It has carried you this far. To neglect it now is to guarantee you will sink in the harbor. So much of what we label normal aging, the stiffness, the fragility, the chronic pain, is not a biological mandate. It is the direct result of disuse. I have seen 80-year-olds who are more flexible and strong than sedentary 50-year-olds. The difference isn't their genes, it's their discipline. They chose to move when it was easier to sit still. They chose to treat their body with respect, not resignation. Physical vitality in old age isn't about running marathons. It's about being able to carry your own groceries, play with your grandchildren, and walk in the sunshine without pain. It's about having the physical freedom to live, not just exist. Devoid of purpose. The fifth trap is the belief that purpose has a retirement age. I see people who were leaders, creators, and problem solvers for 40 years suddenly step off a cliff into a life of absolute nothingness. They believe they've earned the right to be useless, but a human being without a sense of purpose is like a ship without a rudder, adrift and slowly taking on water. We are built to matter, to contribute, to feel that our presence on this earth makes a difference, however small. When you trade purpose for comfort, you make a terrible bargain. I have seen vibrant, successful people wither within a year of retirement. They fell into depression and physical decline because they had no reason to get out of bed in the morning. They chased freedom from responsibility and found themselves in the prison of meaninglessness. The elderly who flourish understand that purpose evolves. It shifts from a career to something else, mentoring a young person, volunteering, creating art, or simply being the anchor of love and wisdom for their family. Purpose is not a job title. It's the fire that warms your soul. Retirement shouldn't be about letting the fire go out. It should be about finding a new kind of fuel. The spiritual anchor. The sixth fatal mistake is arriving at the shores of mortality with no spiritual anchor. As your body changes, as friends pass away, as the horizon of your own life comes into view, you need something more than a bank account and a collection of memories to hold you steady. I have talked with many elderly people who lived their lives entirely on the surface. They pursued success, pleasure, and possessions. But in their final years, they are terrified by the deep questions. Who am I without my job title? What was the point of it all? What happens next? How can I face the end without being consumed by fear? Without some kind of spiritual inner work, these questions are a source of profound dread. People who have ignored their spiritual dimension often spend their last years in a panic, clinging to anything that distracts them from the ultimate reality. But those who have cultivated a spiritual life through faith, meditation, nature, or deep reflection, approach the end differently. They have a sense of peace. They understand they are part of a story larger than their own ego. They know that death is a transition, not an annihilation. Spiritual depth isn't about religion. It's about having the inner resources to face the final chapter with grace instead of terror. The chains of poverty. The seventh fatal error is financial neglect, which guarantees your final years are spent in a state of stress, dependency, and fear. I have seen people who made fortunes in their youth end up choosing between medicine and heat in their old age. They lived for today and never planned for a tomorrow that always arrives. Financial health in old age isn't about being rich. It's about dignity. It's about having the freedom to make choices, to not be a burden, to live with a baseline of security and peace of mind. The tragedy is that building this security isn't complex. It just requires the one thing our culture tells us to avoid: delayed gratification. It requires living within your means and consistently putting something away for the winter of your life. The stress of being poor when you are old and vulnerable is a poison that seeps into everything: your health, your relationships, your spirit. The elderly who age with a sense of calm almost universally made wise financial choices early on. They understood that while money can't buy happiness, a lack of it can certainly buy misery. The final truth. The eighth fatal mistake is to see death as a failure. Our culture treats death like a disease to be fought, denied, and hidden away. But this frantic avoidance is what creates the terror. In my experience with those at the end of life, the ones who suffer the most aren't those in the most physical pain. They are the ones who are spiritually unprepared. They spent a lifetime running from the thought of death, so when it stands at their door, they have no tools to greet it with other than panic and regret. But the ninth and most devastating mistake of all, the one that truly poisons everything, is this: believing that aging is about loss. Believing that you are becoming a lesser version of yourself. This is the ultimate lie. Old age is not about fading away, it is about finally becoming whole. It is the last chapter where the entire story comes together. When you fight it, when you dye your hair and fill your wrinkles in a desperate attempt to look like a poorly preserved version of your younger self, you miss the entire point. You are rejecting the very wisdom and depth that you've spent a lifetime earning. The most beautiful old people are not the ones who look the youngest. They are the ones who have let their life be written on their face. They are the ones who have transformed struggle into strength, experience into wisdom, and have finally, truly become themselves.